Today I'm going to show you how I purchased my 3 investment properties interstate without going to look at them. There are over 15,000 suburbs here in Australia, and it would be very naive of you to think that the suburb or the suburbs that surround where you live is one of the best for investment. This is why it is so important to be able to purchase interstate, because it opens up all the opportunities to different suburbs that you couldn't buy in because you don't live there. Now I get it, it's quite overwhelming purchasing a property at the best of times, let alone buying one interstate when you can't even go to see it. So I thought I'd break down a step-by-step guide on how to purchase interstate for you guys. Step number 1, as always, you need to be doing your data-driven research and find the right areas. Like any good investor or buyer's agent, you will be relying on data to make an informed decision on where to buy. There are a million different data points that you can look at to try and work out where to buy and which areas are going to grow, but you need to start narrowing down a checklist of items that you think are important for growth. Not only does the suburb that you purchase in need to tick off on these data points, but there's also a different set of criteria that I myself look for in a property to align with my strategy. So for me, as I'm purchasing through a company and trust structure and I'm trying to get these properties positive as soon as possible, I target higher yielding properties. So if there's a suburb that yields 3% on average, it's probably not going to work for me. Another thing I also look for is development potential. So this isn't essential, but it's just a bonus on top of a good investment property. So what development potential means is that there's an option for me to either subdivide, put a unit on, or put a granny flat out the back of one of my existing properties that I'm about to purchase. Obviously the property will need to have the right zoning, right square meterage, and some sort of side access to be able to make this happen. So these are things that I look for on top of the data. Point number 2, once you've narrowed down the suburb, it's time to start building relationships within that suburb or those areas. The 2 people we want to be building relationships with are sales agents and property managers. First of all, we've got sales agents. These are the people that sell the properties in the areas. So ultimately, we want to have a relationship with them because they're the ones that are going to provide us with the property. To build a relationship with these sales agents, you want to be quick to the point, you don't want to waste their time, and you want to stand out. Because at the end of the day, they're probably getting a million different calls from people interested in properties, especially when you're buying in hot markets. So the phone call would go something like this. Hey Sam, it's Harley here again, 24 years old from Victoria. Still got my pre-approval ready to go, mate, and itching at the bit to get into a property. I'm looking for a 3-bed, 2-bath on 500 square meters. Has anything came up, or is there anything you know coming to market soon? If he says no, that's all good. We move on, we speak to the next sales agent, and we go from there. Now, the reason we follow up and we want to keep doing this with those agents is because ultimately when a property does come up, we want Sam to think of me, Harley, the 24-year-old from Victoria, that's slightly annoying, that keeps calling him, and this property is perfect for him. Now, it's quite easy to find these sales agents. You can either go to realestate.com or Domain. You can have a look at sold listings. You can have a look at active listings and just have a scroll through at all the different agencies and agents that are selling property within your suburb. Another really good website is ratemyagent.com.au, and you can type in your suburb or suburbs and it'll show all the agents and how many properties they sell in that area. So obviously the ones with more sales in the area are ones that are more active and likely going to be the ones getting deals. You also don't want to neglect the smaller agents in the area because they could still get a deal, so it's worth building a relationship with all of them when you're searching for a property in that suburb. Now, the second person you want to build a relationship with is a property manager, and in my opinion, when buying interstate, the property manager is by far the most important part of your team. Again, to find a great property manager, you can head to ratemyagent.com.au, look up the suburb, and you can go through all the different property management agencies and agents, and ultimately you want to be speaking to the top 3 or 4 out of those ones and seeing who's the right fit for you. Also, word of mouth is a great way to find a property manager, so if you know anyone that's bored in that kind of area, it's always worth asking to get their opinion. Now, it's really important not to rush this process and make sure that you fully trust your property manager, because ultimately they're going to be your point of call when you're going looking for a property, as you can't get there yourself to inspect it. If you did all the due diligence in step number 1 and you found the suburb or the suburbs that you kind of want to target, then it's important to be speaking to your property manager and finding where in that suburb you want to avoid. Within any suburb, there's always going to be good and bad areas. There's going to be a variance in price, and typically there's a reason as to why some places go for a lot more in that side of the suburb and why that suburb they're really cheap. Now, I'm not saying we need to invest in the more expensive properties because they may not be a great investment, but there's definitely going to be areas within each suburb that you want to avoid. These kind of areas that we want to avoid could include housing commission, flood zones, fire prone areas, railways, and a lot of those you can actually find out online. but the main reason I like checking with the property manager is because housing commission can be quite hard to find online. So if you're just following the data and doing research from interstate, it's hard to actually know where the housing commission is, but this is what a property manager deals with every day. They're the ones that are listing properties. They know where this housing commission is, and ultimately it's something you want to avoid. Now, obviously the property manager isn't going to make the investment decision for you. Property managers aren't always property investors themselves, so whatever they say you take with a grain of salt, but they do have some local area expertise that is hard to find online. Now, unlike a sales agent who at the end of the day, their job is just to sell the property, a property manager will have a vested interest in the property actually being a good one and headache free. This is because they're ultimately going to be the one that manages the property. So if they recommend for you to buy this property and it's in a really bad area, there's a lot of crime, a lot of housing commission, and it's going to bring headaches, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with these headaches. So they want their job to be as easy as possible, so they're likely going to tell you point blank, I wouldn't be buying there, that's a very rough area. Again, this shouldn't be the only reason you buy in an area or choose not to buy in an area. It's worth doing your own research on top, but the local area expertise is really beneficial. Step number 3 is time for you to hunt for a property, and this is the time where you really need to trust your team. So once you've found the suburbs and areas you want to invest in, you've found within those suburbs the areas you don't want to invest in, and in the meantime, you've built relationships with agents, so hopefully properties are presented to you. So once the property comes up, your agent might come to you and say, I've got this deal for you, Harley. I reckon it fits what you want to do. You'll obviously run your numbers, and this is when I would then send it to my property manager and just see if they have any opinions on the place. Now, obviously I need to make sure the numbers are right for me and it suits my strategy, but I'm just looking to see if they can see any issues visually or within the area as to why I shouldn't invest there. For example, that street might be a nice street, but the house actually backs onto a housing commission street, so you probably wouldn't want to invest there. That's hard to know unless you speak with a property manager. Now, as we live interstate, it doesn't make sense for us to fly over for each property to inspect it. It's just not feasible. So we need to rely on our property manager to be able to go to this property and send us the adequate pictures and videos so that we know what we're buying. This is especially important when you've got off-market deals being presented to you by sales agents, because the photos and videos are normally pretty basic because they're not on market yet. So whatever your property manager sends you in terms of videos and photos will give you a much better understanding of what you're getting yourself into. Now, a great property manager will be all over this and will know roughly what they're looking at in terms of an investment and any potential issues that there may be. Now, your property manager obviously isn't a building inspector, so they won't know exactly how sound the property is and if there's any major structural issues, but they'll likely have a contact that we can use when it comes time to place an offer. And when you do place an offer, I would 110% recommend putting a building and pest clause in. Basically, what a building and pest inspection clause is it gives you time once you've put the offer in for you to get a building inspector in to check for termites or anything like that. They can also check for any structural issues that you may not know about. This is essential when buying interstate because ultimately we're buying off a few photos and videos that we've received from a property manager. So we really need to make sure that a professional has gone through this property and has tested it out and made sure it's a sound investment. Now, these kind of inspections cost anywhere from $600 to $1,000, and it will be the best $1,000 that you ever spend if they do find a major structural issue. After all, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this investment, so we want to make sure that it's not a lemon and it's not going to be very costly. Obviously, if something does come up, there's a chance that we can negotiate or we can get out of your contract, but this really does depend by state. Each state has a different set of rules, so you'll need to speak to your conveyancer when it comes to this stage and what rights you have to back out of a contract, when you can negotiate and all that information. Now, once this building and pest inspection has been ticked off, it's time to proceed to settlement, and this is where a great property manager gets to work. Now, you've bought this property and it may need a little bit of work done, so they can coordinate trades. They can get a photographer in so that you can get all the photos you need to be able to list the property as soon as it settles. Ultimately, they're just trying to reduce the amount of vacancy you have on the property, which means you're going to save some money. Now, I know all of this information is quite overwhelming, but for you to be a great property investor, you need to have access and be able to buy in any market across Australia. If you can only buy in your backyard, you are fully dependent on where you live and what that market is doing. For example, I live just outside Melbourne at the moment, and right now Melbourne has had a pretty awful run. If I had bought a property here instead of Perth 2 years ago, I would have had almost next to no growth. But I'm sitting here today looking for my 4th investment property because I bought in the right area at the right time, and they were all interstate. For me, buying interstate and buying in my backyard is absolutely no difference. I'm not a builder. I don't know exactly what I'm looking for when I go into a property. I trust my professionals. So even if a property did come up and it was 5 minutes down the road, I would still be getting a building inspector in there. I would still be getting a property manager in there because they're the professionals and this is what they do. Ultimately, you're only as good as the team you have around you, so make sure that you're getting the right people around you and getting the advice from people that have done what you want to do. Good luck buying interstate.